Hello, my name is Brad Hunt. My YouTube channel and Odyssey channel is Discerning What is True. We're going to be tackling the last part of a particular book I've been reading for the last week and a half, I think, The Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. And this will be the last section of it. Um, Very intriguing information from Dr. John Coleman, um, a real hero. Very few of those around, folks, but this is a real hero. He did work for Tavistock, as far as I know of, and apparently that put him in the category of being an MI6 uh, participant. But let's get to the point here. I'm reading the book from Dr. John Coleman. So here we go. Nixon did not abuse his presidential powers. His crime was not defending the Constitution of the United States of America and not charging Miss Catherine Meyer Graham and Ben Bradley with conspiracy to commit insurrection. Mrs. Catherine Meyer Graham's pedigree is the most doubtful kind, as Jessica Fletcher of The Murder She Wrote would soon have discovered. But even knowing that, Mrs. Graham's controllers in the Round Table would have fought hard to keep the lid on things. The role of the Washington Post was to keep the pot boiling for one revelation after another, thereby engendering a climate of public distrust of President Nixon, even when there was not one shred of evidence to support wrongdoing by him. Yet it shows the immense power of the press, as Littman stated, and as Bernays have said, has quite properly anticipated, in that Mrs. Graham, long suspected of the murder of her husband, Philip L. Graham, officially classed as a suicide, should have retained any credibility at all. They don't reveal that in the media, folks. They just don't. They're not about the truth. They're not about trying to sway you in a certain way. In reality, folks, they need your consent. Always need your consent about anything. And when you fall for things like this, you are consenting. Other traitors who have been indicted for insurrection and treason were Kissner, Haig, Haig, Apperbring, Ellsberg, Young, McCord, Joseph Califanin, and Chomsky of the IPS, and those CIA operatives who went to McCord's house and burned all of his papers. Again, it's worth repeating that Watergate, like many other operations we do not have the space to include here, demonstrates the complete control, the exercise of the United States by the Committee of 300. That's right, Noam Chomsky is one of them. Stop falling for people like this, please. He was incredibly popular even when I was in college as a political science major. And I suspected him even at that young age, around 20 years old, was he playing both sides. But I didn't know. I know now. While Nixon kept company with people like Earl Warren and some mafia dons and had built Warren's house, that does not mean that he should have been disgraced over the Watergate affair. My dislike of Nixon stems from his willingness to sign the infamous ABM treaty, that's the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 1972, and his all-too-cozy relationship with Leonard Brezhnev. One of the sorriest slips-up to the Minority Council was the abject failure to expose the dirty role played by Intertel, I should say, the Corning Group, ugly private intelligence agency whom we have already met, who leaked a lot of Watergate material to Edward Kennedy. Private intelligence agencies like Intertel have no right to exist in the United States. They are a menace to our right to privacy and an insult to all free men everywhere. Blame must also fall on those who were supposed to protect President Nixon from the kind of steel mesh net that was thrown around him to isolate him. The intelligence personnel around Nixon was a poor lot who had no knowledge of just how thorough British intelligence operations are. Indeed, they had no inkling that Watergate was a British intelligence operation in its entirety. The Watergate plot was a coup d'etat against the United States of America, as was the murder of John F. Kennedy. Although this fact is not recognized as such today, I am confident that when all the secret papers are finally opened, history will record that two coups d'etats took place, one against Kennedy and one against Nixon. did indeed take place, in which is their weight brought the most violent rape and assault on the institutions upon which the Republic of the United States stands. The individual who most deserves the title of traitor and who is most guilty of sedition is General Alexander Haig, H-A-I-G. This desk-man, officer, colonel, whose paper-stuffing career did not include commanding any troops in battle, was suddenly thrust upon the scene by the invisible upper-level parallel government President Nixon once described him as a man who had to ask Kissner's permission to go to the bathroom. So you see how that is. He's under subordinate. Haig was a product of the Round Table. He was noticed by Round Tabler Joseph Califano, one of Her Majesty's most trusted Round Tablers in the United States. Joseph Califano, legal counsel of the Democratic National Convention, had actually interviewed Alfred Baldwin, one of the plumbers, of a month before the burglary took place. Califano was stupid enough to write a memorandum on his opinion with Baldwin, in which he gave details of information on McCord's background and why McCord had selected Baldwin to be on the team. Even more damaging, Califano's memorandum contained full details of transcripts of wiretaps, of conversations between Nixon and the re-election committee. All this before the break-in occurred. Califano should have been indicted on a score of federal offenses. Instead, he got away clearly with his criminal activity. Sanctimonious Senator Sam Erving, refused to allow Fred Thompson, the minority counsel, to introduce this highly damaging evidence at the Watergate hearing on the spurious ground that it was too speculative. On Round Table orders, Kissner had Haig promoted from colonel to 4-star general in the most meteoric rise ever recorded in the annals of United States military history, in the course of which Haig was leapfrogged over 286 senior U.S. Army generals and high-ranking officers. During Haig's promotion, and as a result of it, 25 senior juniors were forced to resign. As a reward for his treachery towards President Nixon and the United States, Haig was subsequently given the plum job of Commander-in-Chief of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization forces, although he was the least qualified commander ever to hold that position. Here again, he was leapfrogged over 400 senior generals from NATO countries and the United States. When the news of his appointment reached the Soviet Armed Force High Commander, Marshal Orgenkal recalled his 3 top Warsaw Pact generals from Poland and East Germany. There was much merrymaking, clicking of glasses and quaffing of champagne until well into the night, as although Haig's tenure as commander of NATO forces the professional elite cadre of the Soviet armed forces, men who have never been anything else but professional soldiers, held Haig in almost contempt and openly referred to him as the officer manager of NATO. They knew that Haig owed the appointment to the RIIA, not to the United States military. But before his military promotion took him out of Washington, let it be known that Alexander Haig, in conjunction with Kissner, all but destroyed the office of the President of the United States and his government. The chaos left by Kissner and Haig in the wake of Watergate has never been chronicled to the best of my knowledge. On the insistence of the RIIA, Haig virtually took over the management of the government of the United States after the April 1973 coup d'etat, bringing 100 round-table agencies chosen from the Brookings Institute, the Institute of Policy Studies, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Haig filled the top 100 posts in Washington with men who, like himself, were beholden to a foreign power. So you see that's why it's called a coup d'etat. The ensuing debauchery of the Nixon administration was torn asunder, and the United States along with it. Thrusting aside the pious platitudes and posturing of defending the Constitution, Senator Sam Erving did more to change the United States than anything President Nixon was alleged to have done. And the United States has not yet recovered from that near mortal wound of Watergate. A committee of 300 sponsored operation conducted by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Roundtable, and hands-on MI6 officers based in the United States. The way that President Nixon was first isolated, surrounded by traitors, and then confused, followed to the letter the Tavistock method of gaining full control of a person according to the methodology laid down by Tavistock's chief theoretician, Dr. Kurt Lewin. I have already given details of Lewin's methodology elsewhere in this book, but in view of the textbook case of President Richard M. Nixon, I think it's worth repeating. One of the main techniques for breaking morale through a strategy of terror consists in exactly this tactic. Keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. In addition, it frequently validations between severe discipline measures and promises of good treatment together with the spreading of contradictory news makes the cognitive structure of this situation utterly unclear. Then the individual may cease even to know a particular plan would lead towards or away from his goal. Under these conditions, even those individuals who have definitely goals and are ready to take risks are paralyzed by severe inner conflict in regard to what to do. Kistner and Haig followed Tavistock's training manuals to the letter. The result was a distraught, confused, frightened, and demoralized President Nixon, whose only course of action, he was told by Haig, was to resign. In 1983, I wrote 2 works, the Tavistock Institution, Sinister and Deadly, and the Tavistock Institute, British Control of U.S. Policy, based upon Tavistock's secret manuals, which have fallen into my hands. Tavistock Institution methods and actions are spelled out in these 2 works. So successful were Tavistock methods applied to unseat President Nixon that the people of this nation fully believed the calamity of the lies, distortions, and set-piece contrived situations mounted by the conspirators as true, when in fact Watergate was a diabolical lie from end to end. It is important to stress this because we have certainly not seen the last of Washington-type operations. What were the alleged impeachable offenses committed by President Nixon and the so-called smoking gun evidence, which was supposed to back up the charges? First, the smoking gun. This piece of fiction was created by Kistner and Haig around the June 23rd tape, which Haig coerced Nixon into surrendering to Leon Jaworski, Jowrski. I can remember some of these names, folks, because that was a big deal back in the early 70s in my own life. Haig spent hours convincing President Nixon that this tape would sink him because it proved beyond any doubt that Nixon was guilty of serious wrongdoings and a co-conspirator in the Watergate break-in. President Nixon's first response was to tell Haig utterly nonsense to make such a big deal of this, but Haig chipped away until Nixon became convinced that he could not make a successful defense before the Senate, based solely on this particular June 23rd tape. How had Haig accomplished this method? Acting out a scenario prepared for him by the Round Table controllers, Haig had unedited transcript of the smoking gun tape typed by his staff. In reality, there was nothing in the tape that President Nixon could not have explained. Since this, Haig then circulated his unauthorized, unedited transcript of the tape among Nixon's staunchest supporters in the House and Senate and the Republican Party high command. Peppered with smoking gun and devastating and coming from Nixon's trusted aide, the transcript had the effect of a falcon hitting a flock of pigeons. Nixon supporters panicked and ran for cover. Following up his sedition and insurrection, Haig summed up to his office Congressman Charles Wiggins, a staunch Nixon supporter who had agreed to lead the fight in the House to head off impeachment proceedings. In a barefaced, blatant lie, Wiggins was informed by Haig the fight is lost. After that, Wiggins lost all interest in defending Nixon, believing that Nixon himself had agreed to give up. Haig then dealt with Senator Griffith, a leading supporter of the president in the Senate, in the same way. As a result of Haig's seditions, treacherous activities, Senator Griffith immediately wrote a letter to President Nixon calling upon him to resign. 3 months earlier, Round Table controller Institute for Policy Service, that is the child of James Warburg. You know the Warburgs. The Warburgs were the ones that were involved in our country back in the early 1900s. Who continue to chip away at our country to deal with what we call the Federal Reserve System, which is not federal, it's not a reserve, it's not a system. It's outright theft of people's money in this country. And now what they're doing is right now, according to what you're seeing, is that have destroyed the credit of this country. And your money is worth less and less because it's no longer backed by silver and gold. It's interesting, actually, Nixon took us off of the gold standard. That was what they wanted. So continue. Founder and fellow Marcus Raskin delivered exactly the same ultimatum that President Nixon resigned using the British intelligence propaganda journal, the New York Times, on May 25th to delete the ultimatum. The Watergate tragedy was a step in the irreversible transition to barbarism, which is enveloping the United States, which is leading us into a one world government, new world order, so to speak, that is. The United States is now in the same place that Italy found itself when Aldo Moro, Aldo Moro, M-O-R-O, tried to rescue it from creating instability. With what wrongdoing was Nixon charged? John Dory, whose brutish character was well suited to his task of bringing so-called articles of impeachment against the president, was the author and finisher of one of the most far-reaching illegal domestic surveillance counterintelligence operations ever run in the United States. Heading the Interdepartmental Intelligence Unit, IDIU, Dorit, D-O-O-A-R, garnered information from every conceivable agency of the federal government, including the Internal Revenue Service. The program was linked to the Institute for Policy Services. One of the highlights of John Dory's career was to provide the CIA, which is forbidden by law, to engage in domestic surveillance with 10,000 to 12,000 names of citizens he suspected as political dissidents for further investigation. On July 18, 1974, this great upholder of the law with measured promptness delivered the changes against President Nixon, which episode was nationally televised. There was not a single piece of evidence that Nixon had done anything impeachable. Indeed, Dorit's pathetic literacy of Nixon's alleged crimes were so trivial that it is wonder the proceedings went beyond this point. Income tax fiddling, unauthorized bombing of Cambodia, and a vague abuse of power, charge that would never have stuck in the court of law, was the best that Dorit could do. The United States was as unstable as it would ever be with President Nixon resigned on August 8, 1974. Nowhere more so than in our economic and fiscal policy. In 1983, the international bankers met in Williamsburg, Virginia, to work out a strategy to prepare the United States for a total disintegration of the banking system. This planned event was to stampede the U.S. Senate into accepting control of our monetary and fiscal policies by the IMF. Dennis Weatherstone, a Morgan guarantee on Wall Street, stated that he was convinced this was the only way for the United States to save itself. The proposal was endorsed by the Ditchley Group, which has had its beginnings in May of 1982 at Ditchley Park in London on January 10 and 11, 1983. This alien group met in Washington, D.C. in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Clayton Act and conspired to overthrow the sovereignty of the United States of America and its monetary and financial freedom. The United States Attorney General knew of the meeting and its purpose. Instead of charging members of the group with conspiracy to commit a federal crime, he simply looked the other way. Under the above mentioned act, proof of a conspiracy is all that is needed for a felony conviction. And there was ample evidence that a conspiracy did indeed take place, but at the Ditchley Foundation had met at the request of Royal Institute for International Affairs and was hosted by the Round Table. No one in the Justice Department had the courage to take action required by those who had sworn to uphold the laws of the United States. This I don't know, so I'm going to continue on. The Ditchley plan to usurp control of the fiscal and monetary policy of the United States was the brainchild of Sir Harold Lever, L-E-V-E-R, a strong backer of Zionism and a close confidant of members of the British royal family and a member of the Committee of 300. Sir Harold Lever was the director of the giant Unilever conglomerate. You know who they are. A major conglomerate company. They own many different companies. An important committee of 300 company, that is. Lever plan called for IMF influence to be broader so that it could influence central banks of all nations, including the United States, and guide them into the hands of a one world government bank. See, this is what people don't understand. The real factor here is that we have a group of people in England who are determined to destroy what's left of any nation state in here. It's not always the communists out there, so to speak, Soviet Union, Russia, whatever. It's the people here, it's the people with their own, what we call in free governments that are destroying these countries. Now, they're being paid off in some ways, but it's not what we think it is. It's not the communists over here. You see what's happening? The communists are used as a boogeyman, but it's not exactly what we call, what's what I'm trying to think of. They're not the ones that undermine the country. they always draw that to that, you see, always the Soviet Union or Russia, or whatever as there is today. But reality is not them. It's what I would call traitors, not only to their own country of Britain, but also here in the United States. This was considered a vital step in bringing about a situation where the IMF would become the supreme arbiter of world banking. The ultra-secret January meeting was preceded by an earlier meeting in October of 1982 and was attended by representatives of 36 of the world's top banks who met at New York Vista Hotel. Security for the October 26th and 27th seminar was as tight as anything ever seen in the Big Apple. This earlier Ditchley Group meeting also violated U.S. law. Addressing the meeting, Sir Harold Lever said it was essential that national sovereignty as an archaic hangover must be ended before the year 2000. Well, let me explain to you something real quick here, folks. The nation states haven't been around for no more than 200 or 300 years. Okay? Think about Germany. Okay? Germany was basically in the late 1870s, folks. Other countries are like we think Austrian Hungarian Empire. The nation state is actually a young format, or not format, but a way of running a country, unlike a king and queen or what we call royalty. Think about what took place in Russia. The Tsar. Who was the Tsar? It's royalty. There has not been any form of nation state, so to speak, even in Russia. And they act like it's antiquated and old, but reality is actually not even that old at all. In fact, the United States is probably one of the oldest. And yet they want to ditch it. Why? Because they want their world government, you see. This is could be part of their stepping stone. Maybe not. I do not know that for Zach. The United States, the other thing, the whole thing that took place in New York, the 2001 9/11 thing, was all about, again, another psyop, for a psyop, so to speak, something that was done on national TV. Again, using that to destroy people's morale and what this country is all about. It all started, a lot of it's also started with Watergate, as he's saying here, and also with Kennedy and other issues that have taken place. It's a way of actually gnawing at the psyche of the American people. These people are criminals, folks. Criminals. The United States will soon have to realize that it will will be no better off than any other third world country when the IMF takes control, says Sir Harold. It was later reported to the delegates that plans to appoint the IMF as the controller of the United States fiscal policies were being ready to bring a bill for the United Senate by the year 2000. So this is the whole idea of something is, again, like I said earlier, the nation state is not that old at all, folks, not at all. And yet they want to ditch it. Remember de Vries, V-I-R-I-E-S, speaking for Morgan Guarantee, said it was high time the United States become a member of the Bank of International Settlements. There must be a reconsideration of U.S. hesitance over the past 50 years. Vires declared. Some British and German bankers, fearing possible violation of U.S. law, said that the Ditchley Group is nothing but a committee to iron out exchange rate problems. Felix Rohatyn, R-O-H-A-T-Y-N, also spoke to the great need to change U.S. banking law so that the IMF could play a greater role in this country. Of course it is. It wants to destroy the country, folks. Rohatyn headed Lazar Ferries, a Club of Rome bank and part of the Eagle Star Group, which we have already met. We already talked about that group. Roundtable, William Ogden and Werner Stang, S-T-A-N-G, spoke enthusiastic in support of surrendering U.S. fiscal sovereignty to the IMF and the Bank of International Studies. Delegates representing the Alpha Ranking Group, a P2 Freemasonry bank, said the United States must be forced to surrender to the higher authority of a world bank before any progress towards the new world order could be made. On January 8, 1983, before their big meeting in January 10, 11, Hans Vogel, a leading Club of Rome member, was received at the White House by President Ronald Reagan, had invited George Shultz, Caspar Weinberger, George Kennett, and Lane Kirkland to be present at his meeting with Vogel. who explained to President Reagan what the aims and objectives of the Ditchley Group were. That day, President Reagan did a about-face and worked with the Committee of 300 various agencies to enhance or advance the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements as the authority of U.S. domestic and foreign monetary policies. So here it is, folks. President Reagan was no better than anybody else here, folks. He just was a good actor, you see. We all got burned by him, okay? Which he actually hired some of the poorest people around him anyway. George Shultz, Caspar Weinberger, George Kennett. These guys are pretty bad people, folks, especially Weinberger. The invisible government of the Committee of 300 has put tremendous pressure on America to change its ways for the worse. America is the last bastion of freedom, and unless our freedoms are taken away from us, progress towards a one world government will be considerably slow. Such an undertaking as a one world government is a massive one, requiring a great deal of skill, organizing ability, control of governments and their policies. The only organization that could possibly have undertaken this mammoth task with any hope of success is the Committee of 300, and we have seen just how far it has come towards total success. Above all, the battle is a spiritual one. Unfortunately, the Christian churches have become little more than the social clubs ran by the infinite evil World Council of Churches, whose beginning lie not in Moscow, but in the city of London. It's all pointing to the city of London, the Vatican, folks. It's all there. It's not always the Russians here, okay? Again, I told you it's just a boogeyman. They do what they're told to do just like anybody else is. They're no better. As we see from the chart at the end of this book, which gives the structure of the one world government church, let's see if I can show you that, if I can find the book right quick here. Maybe it's not over here. I'll find it here. I'll share it with you when I get ready to leave here. Leave when I finish my whole thing here. Well, I actually can show it here right now. Let's see it now. Let me show you this. Okay. This is the whole thing. You can see it. The Committee of 300. The way it's set up. And then I shared that last night in my video, but today I'll share this here. This is the structure of Freemasonry. Sorry, it's not a better picture, folks. Maybe I'll make a copy of this on my copier, which I've seen it on the internet. So that's anyway, I just want to share that information with you. Let me continue on. This body was set up in the 1920s to serve as a vehicle for one world government policies and stands as a monument to the long-range planning capacity of the Committee of 300. Another corrupt body similar to the structure and design of WCC, the World Council of Churches, the Union of Concerned Scientists set up by the Trilateral Commission and funded by Carnegie Endowment Fund, the Ford Foundation, and the Aspen Institute. All these groups are simply these people like, the Aspen Institute, the Ford Foundation, they give money in order for this to allow this to happen, you see. And then they educate the younger generation of this, and they don't have what I call the background, the history of what this organization is all about. They just simply see, oh, this is a great way for me to move up. It's a good job, whatever, you see. And they're brainwashed. This is the group that has led the fight to prevent the United States from mounting an effective deterrent against Soviet cosmosphere, space-based laser beam weapons, which can destroy selected targets in the United States or elsewhere from outer space. I don't know if that's true or not, folks. I don't know. I speculate on that. The United States SDI program was designed to counter the threat posed by Soviet cosmosphere, a threat which still exists despite the assurance that communism is dead. Communism's never been dead, folks. It's just morphed into something else. Soviet spokesman Georgy Arbatov told a meeting at the Union of Concerned Scientists that it is important for them to oppose the SDI program because if the SDI program becomes operational, it will be a military catastrophe. Year after year, the Union of Concerned Scientists have opposed every budget, which included funding for the vital SDI program until by the end of 1991, there's not even enough money to fund further research still required, let alone place the system in orbit. The Union of Concerned Scientists is run by the Royal Institute for International Affairs and is heavily infiltrated with MI6 British intelligence agents. It's all directed by the British. Same way with them involved in the First World War, the whole thing with here in the United States with Colonel Mandel House, also the threading up the Second World War. They've been involved with it always. Even the war that took place in South Africa against the Boers. There's not one single aspect of life in America that is not watched over, steered in the right direction, manipulated, and controlled by the invisible government of the Committee of 300. There's not one elected official or political leader that is not subject to its rule. No one thus far has gotten away with defying our secret rulers, who do not hesitate to make a horrible example of anyone, including the President of the United States of America. From 1776, when Jeremy Bentham, Bentham, and William Petty, the Earl of Shelburne, fresh from the triumph of the French Revolution, which they planned and ran, were drafted by the British Crown to bring their combined experience to bear against the colonists, to 1812, when the British sacked and burned Washington, destroying secret documents that would have exposed the treason being worked against the young United States of America, to the Watergating of President Nixon and assassination of President Kennedy. The hand of the Committee of 300 is clearly visible here. This book is an attempt to open the eyes of American people to this terrible truth. We are not an independent nation, nor can we ever be as long as we are ruled by an invisible government, that is the Committee of 300. And that is going to be it here. This day I will show some other agencies here that are part of this, the past and present institutions, organizations, and those directly under influence of the Committee of 300. So these are the groups that are involved. This is not, last night I shared some of the think tanks, but these are smaller groups, but they're still involved, okay? And don't take these for granted. They're important. They are Academy for Contemporary Problems, Africa Fund, Agency of International Development, Albert Previn, Previn Foundation, Alliance Israelite Universal, American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, which is a bad group, American Council on Race Relations, American Defense Society, American Press Institute, American Protective League, Anti-Defamation League, another bad group, Arab Bureau, Arab Higher Committee, ARCA, ARCA Foundation, Armor Research Foundation, Armed Control and Foreign Policy Caucus, Arthur D. Little Incorporated, Asian Research Institute, the Aspen Institute, Association for Humanist Psychology, Argumentation Research Center, Baron de Hirsch Fund, Bataille Memorial Institute, Berger, Berger National Foundation, Berlin Center for Future Research, Bilderbergers. Bilderbergers are not the top people, folks. 300 Club, the 300 group of Committee of 300 are far above them. They are important, but they're not as important as committees of 300. The major ones I see that basically John Coleman should point out simply is this Tavistock's very important, and so the Committee of 300. Makes perfect sense. The Black Order, Boycott Japanese Goods Conference, British Newfoundland Corporation, British Royal Society, Brotherhood of Cooperative Commonwealth, Bureau of International Revolutionary Propaganda. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Canadian Jewish Congress, Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral Science, Center for Constitutional Rights. See, they're involved with right-wing groups too, folks. Center for Cuban Studies, Center for Democratic Institutions, Center for International Policy, Center for the Study of Responsive Law, Christian Socialist League, the CINI Foundation, the Club of Rome, Common Forum, Committee for the Next 30 Years. It's an interesting name, isn't it? Committee for the Next 30 Years, as though something's going to happen. Planning for that. Committee of 14, Committee on National Morale, Committee to Frame a World Constitution, the Communist League, Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CFR, David Sassoon Company, the Beers Consolidated Mines, Democratic League of Brussels, East India Committee of 300, Economic and Social Control, the ECOSOC. Environmental Fund. See, they're involved in all these groups, environmental funds, all these groups. Okay, you got to realize this, folks. You know, they have this clever, slick advertising, whatever you call it, and they fool you. Environmental Metrics Incorporated, Esalen Institute, the Fabian Society, Federation of American Zionists, Fellowship for Christian Social Order, Fellowship of Reconciliation, Ford Foundation, Forum University Institution Educational Research, Foundation for National Progress, Garland Fund, German Marshall Fund, Governing Body of the Israelite Religious Community, Gulf South Research Institute, Haganot, Harvard University, Hell's Fire Club. Oh, here's an interesting one. Horace Mann League. You know who Horace Mann is? He's the one who developed all this cognitive stuff, not cognitive, but educational thing that started back in the early 1820s. He's the one that actually got the government involved in education, which I'm very much against. The Hudson Guild, the Hudson Institute, Hudson Bay Company, Imperial College of University of London, Institute of Christian Fellowship, that's the Industrial Christian Fellowship, Institute for Brain Research, Institute for Pacific Relations, Institute for Policy Studies, Institute for Social Research, Institute for the Future, Institute for World Order, Institute on Drugs, Crime, and Justice, APRA, Inter-American Social Development Institutes, International Institute for Strategic Studies, Interreligious Peace Colloquium, IGUN, IRGUN, Knights of Malta, League of Nations. That name has never gone away, has it? Logistic Management Institute, London Board of Deputies of British Jews, London School of Economics, that's a major one, folks. London School of Economics. This one I never understood here. Mary Carter Paint Company. I don't understand that one. That was kind of blows me away. I don't know what this is about, that one. MIT, the Mellon Institute, Metaphysics Societies, Milner Group, Makata Metals, Mon-Perrine Society, NAACP, National Action Research on Military/Industrial Complex, National Center for Productivity Institute, National Council of Churches, National Opinion Research Center, National Training Laboratories, New Democratic Coalition, New World Foundation, New York Rand Institute, NORM, NORML, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the Oddfellows. You know those groups. You heard of those guys. They're in part of this too, folks. Order of St. John of Jerusalem. Oh yeah, Order of the Golden Dawn. They're involved with that too, folks. So you got to watch what you're playing with. These are fire people, baby. These are bad people. Oxfam, OXFAM, Oxford Unival, Pacific Studies Center, Palisades Foundation, Peninsula and Oriental Navigation Company, which is the P&O company a long time ago. It's been around for a long time. Permadex, Princeton University, the RAND Corporation, the RAND School of Social Sciences, Research Triangle Institute. I believe that's actually in Raleigh. I'm guessing that. That's what I'm thinking. It's where it's called Research Triangle up in Raleigh area. And based upon what I call the three major schools there, Duke, North Carolina, and NC State. Rhodes Scholarship Committee, Rio Tinto Zinc Company, Riverside Church Disarmament Program, Roundtable, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, big group, Russell Sage Foundation, San Francisco Foundation, Sharps Pixley, Pixley Ward, Social Science Research Council, Socialist International, Socialist Party of the United States, Society for Promotion of Study of Religion, Society of Heaven, which is called the Triads, Soviet State Committee for Science and Technology, SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Sun Yat-sen Society, System Development Corporation, naturally Tavistock's in here, Tempo Corporation, the High 12 International, the Public Agenda Foundation, the Quality of Life Institute, the Theosophical Societies. Get it? Theosophical Society? The Thrill Society, which is the one that brought Hitler up. He was involved. Transatlantic Council, the Trilateral Commission, the U.S. Association of the Club of Rome, U.S. Institution for Peace, Union of Concerned Scientists, UNITAR, UNITAR, University of Pennsylvania at the Wharton School, and then James P. Warburg and family. Major family has been involved in destroying this country since way back in the 1900s, folks. Western Training Laboratories, Wilton Park, Women's Christian Temperance Union. Oh, that's the ones that were involved with the, the alcohol, you see. Wang Hong Company, Work in America Institution, and in the World Council of Churches. So then there are other groups here that are what I would call, still important, but they're controlled, you see. These are special foundation and interest groups. The Arab Bureau, Aristotle Society, the Asian Research Institute, Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation, British American Canadian Corporation, Brotherhood of Eternal Love, the Cambers Apostles, Canadian Histrodome Campaign, Canadian Pacific Limited, Caribbean-Central American Action Group, China Albright Holding Limited, Chinese People Institute of Foreign Affairs, Council of South America, Endangered People Society, English Property Corporation Limited, Hospice Incorporated, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, International Red Cross, Jerusalem Foundation in Canada, Kistner Associates, Kowloon Chamber of Commerce, Organization of American States, Overseas Chinese Affairs Committee, the Radio Corporation of America, which is RCA, the Royal Police of Hong Kong, and YMCA. And then the banks here, I'm not going to go in. They're just major. There's a tons of them here, folks. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Anyway, I don't want to beset you with all this, but anyway, it's important for you to see how many groups are involved here with wanting to set up world government. And you must understand one thing: you cannot consent to these people, folks. You can't. You cannot do that. There are probably, I'm thinking, there's a ton of banks here. There's probably at least close to 150 of them, maybe close to that. So, and let's say one more thing here is the BCCI, the bank has been indicted on several charges of being heavily involved in drug money laundering throughout the world. Its structure girts every operation of the Committee of 300. Of interest in the corporate structure, mainly the Middle Eastern interest, is 35% of stock held by these particular people. I'm sorry. They are the ruling family of Bahrain, the ruling family of Sharjah, the ruling family of Dubai, it's DHUBAI, the ruling family of Saudi Arabia, the ruling family of Iran, group of Middle Eastern businessmen. The BCCI Cayman's Islands is 41%. And yes, by far, the Bank of America is at 24%. So you put that 5, and that would be 65%. The rest of these other banks. Us being here, I hope that it's starting to make some sense for you to understand what is going on. And this is it for the Committee of 300 book. This is it. That's a marvelous book. Again, this is a book. This book is available if you want to order it for less than $20 at Amazon. It's your choice to see what's going on and putting the things together. And Dr. John Coleman has done a marvelous work, but he's one of those who basically apparently got out of the group of the Tavistock, and he got their game plan. Okay. So we'll talk to you soon, and thank you for being here, and spread the information. Again, like I said, if you feel like this is valuable, then please share with others. It's important that we help others to become aware of who the enemy is. Thank you. You have a good day.